Okay, we'll call the July meeting of the Long Island Railroad Committee to order. We have two public speakers. Murray Bowden. Mr. Bowden.
Morning.
Good morning.
I have a correction to the minutes of last meeting. Susan Metzger was the chairperson of Metro-North Committee, and Mitch Paley should be the chairperson and not chairman. Gender equity requires that you use the same term for both people. Right, Susan? Thank you. Stop smiling, Pat. Pat, you're up. Don't hide! Don't hide. There was an accident again on the Long Island Railroad where somebody did not stop at the flashing red lights. I know that it is completely 100% legal to use traffic lights at the railroad crossings instead of flashing red lights. Tradition is hard to change, people. It's time to stop having car, train accidents throughout everywhere where there is light rail. New Jersey, Denver, Atlanta, Boston, all light rail. Light rail meaning a railroad car that weighs less. That's all light rail means. All light rail is controlled by traffic lights in thousands of locations. So why do we do it different here? On a 3rd Avenue, on a Willis Avenue bridge, you've got gates with traffic lights. On a Hutchinson River Parkway, Co-op City, you've got crossing, gates, traffic lights. Some places up in have duplicate. East Hampton at the lumber yard. Drivers aren't paying attention anymore. It's called distracted driving. You all stop at a traffic light and the light turns green and nobody moves because the guy in the front's reading his text. You can give a violation ticket by camera to somebody passing a red light. I know I've gotten one on 10th Avenue because I inadvertently didn't see the light. You could put traffic cameras because you don't have enough police officers to put at every railroad crossing, but you can put a red light camera at every crossing. Relatively cheap. Certainly cheaper than one bad accident. Time to change, people. Stop killing people unnecessarily. Reduce the traffic, car, train accidents. Put in camera-controlled traffic lights. Bridges and tunnels has camera-controlled tolls. No more toll booths. If they can read the license plate that well, you can read the license plate at the railroad crossings. So if there's another accident and you don't begin to change to red lights.
Thank you, sir. I know those issues and others will be discussed at the Safety Committee meeting on Wednesday. I've already raised them. Thank you. Omar Vera.
Good morning, MTA.
Good morning.
Our committee. How are y'all doing after this long month with July 4th? I'm doing good. All right, a couple things. First, you spelled my last name with a slight typo. My last name, Vera, has one R, not two. So it's fine.
We apologize.
Hey, it's totally fine. Everything's fine. Second, I'd like to ask Veronica how's her first month as a full MTA board member. Must be really fun, right? All right. Now on to the business. Third, I would like to recommend that for stations within New York City, or stations even bound for Penn Station, like within New York City, it's not really necessarily to put to New York because you're within the city's boundaries. So better put like to Penn Station or to Manhattan, or just follow like just like they do in the Atlantic branch, just to Brooklyn. That's fine. Just go by the borough, by the station, within New York City. Outside to New York is just fine. Fourth, I was wondering, is there like an LIRR equivalent of the Second Avenue's like information center that I entered like earlier this month? Because that one was transit, and I think people would be very, very, very interested to learn more about the East Side Access if we have like an information center for that. So, is there one? If not, then maybe that might be a picture of an idea. And fifth, I reiterate my support for basically what I said in the minutes last month, even though some may not be immediately feasible, but it's for the benefit of everybody, especially like to install, like I said, the air train tickets, like joint like LIR air train tickets at the Atlantic Terminal, since that's the second busiest used station, most used station in the system. And last but not least, let's move forward into the 21st century. Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much, and I yield back the balance of my time. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Are there any other public speakers? If not, approval of the minutes with the two minor changes. I'll become a chairperson, and we will spell Mr. Vera's name with one R. Any approval of the minutes, so be it? Moved, second, thank you very much. Are there any changes to the work plan?
No changes to the work
There are
plan.
no changes to the work plan? Okay, so we'll go right to the President's report. Pat?
Thank you, Mitch, and good morning. Want to report on a couple things here. First, myself and Lisa Pickey, the Executive Vice President, and a number of our staff went out recently to meet with representatives of the East End about our service on the East End. It was a very productive meeting. It is in line with a number of other meetings we've conducted as part of our long-range network strategy study. So when we went out there, we combined both a long-term look at what changes need to be made to our network with a short-term look at what is out there now and what improvements, problems are out there. So it was a very productive meeting. It was a very cooperative meeting. We made a lot of good progress, and I'm happy to report on a couple things. One, as part of the July financial plan that will be presented to the Finance Committee today, the Long Island Railroad has included year-round weekend service on the Greenport, out to Greenport. Currently, we terminate the service at Thanksgiving time and then resume it in March. So it will be an increase, small increase to the budget to add that service to that, and it's very well received by the representatives out there. There are a number of other areas where we tried to identify ways to work together and make some adjustments to the service to make it better, to make it more attractive to the residents out there. There is currently a significant reverse commute out there, particularly on the South Fork, that we will work with the local elected officials and businesses and their bus planning folks to try and find ways to improve the commute of people going east in the morning and coming west in the evening. As you know, our service is generally structured to get people into Manhattan, to get people home, and this is a situation where people actually want to go east to go to work. So it's a different problem for us. But it was a very productive meeting, and the results from our perspective were very, very good. Mobile ticketing. We launched mobile ticketing back in June 30th, I believe, is the date we actually started it. It is in place on the Port Washington branch, and the intent is that we will roll it out to the rest of the system hopefully by the end of the summer, and we're working very hard to that. We need to get to all our crews and have them all trained on it. But so far, the app is working well. The reaction has been very, very good. And it is something that I think will be popular and give people an alternative to standing in line at the ticket machines to acquire their tickets. We have a big event coming up I'd like to mention, and that is there will be a PGA Tour event the last weekend in August. It's actually the 23rd to the 28th. It is out at Bethpage State Park, and it is a return out there. The tour comes there occasionally. We've had hosted U.S. Opens there and one previous Barclay event, and this is the next round of that. There is no parking at Bethpage State Park for people who want to go there. So the Long Island Railroad is certainly a great option. We will use our Farmingdale station as a drop-off point, and the PGA will furnish a shuttle bus operation that'll run back and forth from Farmingdale Station to the state park. Final thing I want to mention is just ridership. Ridership continues to be good. We're up 2.7% year-to-date. We're up over 1 million people as compared to last year at this point in time. So we continue to see strong ridership growth on the Long Island Railroad. And that's the extent of my remarks.
Questions, comments? Chuck?
Two quick questions. I understand on the e-ticket that the internet reception at Penn and at Atlantic Avenue at the Atlantic Terminal is something less than adequate. Have you had a chance to check that out as to what that's...
Yeah, I concur. It's less than adequate.
Is there anything we could or should be doing otherwise?
Well, we're working very closely with the Transit Authority on Transit Wireless. If you remember, they're doing a number of their stations, and Atlantic Terminal in Brooklyn, which is our biggest problem, is a location that is obviously a subway location as well as a location for us. Penn Station's a little bit better than Atlantic Terminal in terms of reception. There is reception in Penn Station.
Second is...
Chuck, you want just talking to the microphone? So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
thank you.
My second question is something that I find hard to understand if it's accurate. There is a claim raised that the ridership in Queens increased by 57%, but decreased 30% in Manhattan and 46% in Brooklyn, and also decreased in Nassau and in Suffolk. Is that accurate?
That's one I'll have to get back to you on.
Will you?
I will.
Because if it is, it may have some bearing, may be relevant to a point that Andy Albert has been making for some time in terms of trying to address fares involving Queens and Brooklyn. I'll give you the source, which you obviously know.
Okay.
It's the blog.
It's your blog, yes.
And if it's correct, it's an important statistic because it seems to be a change in travel patterns. If there's less coming in from Nassau and Suffolk and more from Queens or intra-city, then maybe we have to do something about that.
Yeah, I'll have to check because I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it is interesting. I got the same data, but the interesting thing to me is usually we've seen increase of Port Washington branch, which is mostly a Queens branch, that's northeastern Queens, but there are even dramatic increases at St. Albans and Malvern and some places that I didn't think there were when they look over a long period of time. So I think that's something we should look at, and especially looking at the next fare increase.
Right, obviously, you know, the chairman has indicated that a variety of these fare issues, F-A-R-E issues, are on the agenda as part of the fare discussions for 2017. So these issues, whether it's whatever you call them, but the changing demographics and travel patterns obviously have to be taken into account when we make those decisions. So let's wait for the president to get back to us on, what the numbers are, and then we can take those into account.
I would be surprised if these numbers really do stand up over a period of
as I
time.
said.
But that's what I want to find out.
Yeah, let's find out. Ira, do you have anything else?
Just being from Queens, I'd love to see the issue addressed.
Well, being from Eastern Suffolk, I want to thank Pat and his staff for going out and
On behalf of the Bronx, I thank you.
making the roads out there and the trip out there to my compatriots out on Eastern Suffolk County, and I know they were very pleased because I've gotten a number of comments back from them, the elected officials out there, as to the willingness of the railroad to talk about opportunities. Not every opportunity can be fulfilled, but talking about them and seeing which ones can be, I think, were a very important part of that and a very important component. So I just want to thank Pat and the staff for taking care of that and seeing what we can do. Okay. Safety? Ori?
Good morning. Our safety report can be found on page 78 of your book, and we're reporting on our safety performance through the end of May and the 3-year period prior for the 12-month averages. I'm pleased to report that our customer accident rate as well as our employee lost time injury rate continues to trend downward. Also of note, we received 21 C3RS reports in May of this year. Also, our community education and outreach partnership with MTA Police reached over 50,000 folks through the end of May of this year. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Chuck?
This may not be in your department, but I understand there were 2 derailments of work trains out on Long Island in the course of the past month. Any reason? Is there something going on?
One, there's a lot of work going on, but 2 of them both happened in the same weekend, so it was not a good weekend. One was a work train, which was transporting ballast out there to fill in, and the second one is what we call a production tamper. A production tamper is what levels out the track and smooths the ride on the track by tamping and leveling the alignment. And they both derailed on the same weekend. 2 different locations, one near Jamaica and the other one down near Woodside. So,
Could it have been the load shifting?
the freight train is one we're looking very carefully at in terms of what happened. That I call it a freight train. It's a work train that was moving ballast. That one's a little more questionable. We don't have a result of the investigation at this point in time.
Do you at any point foresee, because you're planning to provide additional locomotives for for freight trains, do you foresee in the foreseeable future that issues of shifting of weights, the potentially excessive weights on some of these can become a problem? And if so, what steps can be taken in that regard?
Well, it's not a locomotive issue, but how when we put ballast out there, for example, there are hopper cars that have chutes that come down that are operated by people on the ground with remote control, and the train is actually dropping ballast at the same time it's moving. So it is an operation that is done very, very carefully, but you do wind up with a train with full ballast cars and empty ballast cars as you progress down the track. So we do. It's all very slow speed, which is why it is a little bit unclear what happened this time. But train handling is an important piece of that.
Any other questions on safety? Okay. Capital Construction? Michael?
Good morning. I'd like to report first in Manhattan, and this is the fit-out of the concourse. This is contract 14B. At this point, approximately 55% of the structural concrete floor slab has been completed, and we expect to have the whole slab completed by December. The new access to the dining concourse is proceeding as planned, and the concrete escalator pits and pit walls have been placed have been actually put in place. And right now, the ramp formwork is underway for placement of a new ramp from platform J to the concourse. The forecasted completion of the entire contract right now is trending late, about 6 months, due to the late submission of structural steel shop drawings from the contractor. And we have actually placed the contractor on notice that they have to provide a recovery schedule, so we will not have to assess liquidating damages. They are clearly understanding that, and at this point we're expecting that, and we've done it directly and through our CM. The north structure, this is the tunnels and the north structure leading into the station itself. The substantial completion date is June 2017, and currently the contract is on schedule for completion within the next year. They completed the east upper level wall outer layers of reinforcement, and the work is actually continuing with the lining of the eastbound tunnel 4 and some other work. So that's actually on schedule to complete within a year. As we move to Queens, the Plaza substation in Queens we expect substantial completion targeting for September 6, 2016. And this is also, actually that's contingent on a mod that we are putting in place. There is some waterproofing that needs to happen at the interface between the tunnels and the facility. A contract that includes, actually it's called 057, the installation of a new bridge, the 48th Street Bridge, and the contractor is proceeding and has in fact completed the drilling for about 60% of the secant piles, and I'm sure Ira has noticed we stopped demolition. So that's behind us right now. The 57A, this is the tunnel shield that's progressed with the completion of the 6 temporary launch frames, and we have done, for the moment, only about 28 of the 620 linear feet of tunneling, and as of actually last week, so that is proceeding. As far as the system package, we have actually continued to install the electrical conduits and mechanical at 8 of our vent facilities, and they are basically primarily in Queens, and also the tunnel lighting fixtures and cabbing is ongoing right now for the Queens tunnel, the A, B, C, D, as well as the Yardley tunnels. The traction power, there's the other contract. The work for the Con Ed service has been completed, and the service will power Harold. The signal house is waiting on Con Ed's energization. As you know, when it is very warm outside, we kind of cannot do that, so we're expecting for cooler weather. To date, I would say that we have committed about $8.7 billion in construction. We have about $1.5 billion more to commit, And out of the 8.7, I would say that about 75% has been completed. There was another 25% to go. With that, I'm completing my report on East Side Access.
Questions for Michael? Okay, thank you, Michael. Chief, police report?
Good morning. The police report begins on page 26. For June, we had 15 incidents in 2016 compared to 13 in 2015. We did have 3 robberies compared to 2 last year, 1 in Brentwood with an arrest, 1 in Rockville Center with an arrest, and 1 in East New York. That case is still active and being investigated. As mentioned at the Metro North meeting, and it bears repeating, grade crossing safety continues to be a major priority for Long Island Railroad and the MTA Police. Year-to-date, 864 summonses have been issued at Long Island Railroad grade crossings. The New York Vehicle and Traffic Law makes clear that a motorist has an absolute duty to stop when at a crossing where the red lights are flashing to give warning of an approaching train. Moreover, under the Vehicle and Traffic Law, and as reflected in the Department of Motor Vehicles Driver Manual, the motorist must remain stopped until the flashing red lights have stopped. We have enforced and will continue to enforce these requirements to protect the public, railroad passengers, and employees. And as mentioned by President Nowakowski, we're working with the Long Island Railroad and the New York State Police for the Barclays event in late August. If there's any questions.
Questions? I did notice, as part of the safety report, obviously on page 78, the 50% increase in summonses at grade crossings. Hopefully, one of these days, people will get it. We can only hope. Until then, I think it's clear the MTA Police will continue to enforce the law to the best of its ability by giving out summonses and tickets and whatever else we need to do, because it continues to be an issue in some fashion. And I know we're going to have a longer discussion about it at safety, but it continues to be a major issue in that regard. Thank you. Okay. Information items. Oh, one of my favorite subjects. Penn Station. Look at that, right there on the first list.
So the annual Penn Station retail report is in the board book. Jeff Rosen is here if there are any questions anyone may have.
Other than when are they going to condemn it?
Well, I think it's, let's put it that way. Absent that solution, the amount of attention now being paid to Penn Station and its environs is welcome. There is no question that people are finally beginning to realize it. Maybe it's because my friends from Metro North will be there soon, and they want to make the place look nicer for them. That's okay. We'll take it as part of that occurrence also. But it's...
Bronx insists.
I understand. But it's clear that there are a number of issues going on. There are a number of improvements to the extent the place can be improved. Obviously, we have issues with, Penn Station visioning, which we hope will be forthcoming as quickly as possible. And I know that, Pat, we have money in our capital plan for railroad improvements at Penn Station. If maybe in the next couple of months you could give us an update on what's going to happen there and where that's going to happen, that could be helpful in that regard. Because it does play a role, while the railroad only owns or controls a small part of the station, we should make sure our part is as nice as it can be, for lack of a better term.
Yes, I mean, some of the stuff we're doing is state of good repair. It's air handling units and chiller units and elevators and escalator improvements. It's nothing additional. It's
Right.
making sure what's there is in a state of good repair. But there are some additional improvements that we have planned. But we're working very closely with the governor's initiatives there and trying to coordinate and make sure we don't bump into each other,
Right.
and we work together in a coordinated fashion.
Thank you. Just the new lights at Duane Reade by itself help. because it lightens up that entire area in front of the ticket windows to the extent that you can actually now almost see where you can going in that regard. So
That
we
may
thank,
be a
we thank our friends at
disadvantage.
Dwayne Reed for that.
You may actually see something.
That's
that you
very
may not.
true. That's
Enjoy.
very true.
Excuse me, Mitch, I have one
Yes.
comment about that. I just don't want us to lose to me, right now, is the most important vision is improved and maybe more universal signage, because
Yeah.
people are lost in this place all the time. There may be people there for years that still haven't gotten out of, I don't know, but anybody who talks to me, but that's the one thing. If you're a New Yorker and you grew up, you know where everything is, hopefully.
Right.
But people are lost in that station, and we really have to, and one thing, the visioning thing I was hoping would do was at least that for a first phase, so I'm anxious to see that.
Well, I know
happen.
that they are working on joint signage, I believe, between all the various agencies to make sure it is at least as consistent as possible, the same type, the same color, and all of that, so that it looks like it's one station. At the moment, of course, it looks like it's 4 stations with one roof, and unfortunately, it is to some degree, but I know, because I've seen that, aspect of it. But we'll follow up on that. Okay, there's no other issues on that. The environmental audit is on page 39.
Yeah, again, that's an annual report. It's in there for your information, and you're happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on that item? If not, the fall construction schedule.
Yeah, fall construction schedule, again, with no meeting in August, we have 2 months' worth of work that we're showing here this month, so there's a number of projects that are going on. We continue to work on the Port Washington branch. We're going to do some work out at Huntington. And one of the projects that's the board was advised of recently, which is the rebuild of the Hicksville station, gets underway with track outages. That's one worthy of note. Hicksville Station is our 3rd busiest station on the entire Long Island Railroad, so it's going to be a complicated construction handling that level of traffic at the same time completely rebuilding an aerial station.
And I also noticed there are, I don't want to use the word significant, but there are major changes with regard to the construction of the second track between Farmingdale and Ronkonkoma in that regard.
Yeah, what they're going to see there next is a lot of grade crossing replacements as part of that project. So we have a lot of weekend outages on grade crossings out there.
Okay. Because those of us who travel the Ronkonkoma branch can clearly see the progress that is being made on second track, at least the part between Central Islip and Ronkonkoma, and you can see they get up to the grade crossing and then they stop because they have to make whatever improvements have to be made there first.
The other event that's of note that's going to go on out there is we're actually bringing in a track laying machine that will lay the Phase 1 track starting in mid-August, I believe, right, Bruce? So
Good.
that will be an impressive piece of machinery that comes here, and it walks down the tracks and can lay up to a mile of brand-new track a day.
Good. Okay. All right. The Amtrak agreement, another one of our favorite subjects, but we'll...
Yeah, Bill Wheeler's here if there are any questions.
Only
Again,
Bill can defend Amtrak agreement.
The agreement is under the pre-act, as was discussed at Metro North Committee. There are information items at Metro North. It's an information item for us. It'll actually be a voting item at the Finance Committee, but it is something that's been in the works for how many years, Bill? So it is an effort that Bill has dedicated a lot of time to.
I have no doubts. Anything with Amtrak is a lot of time, whatever it happens to be in that
And
regard.
13 states too, right, Bill?
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on that for Bill? If not, Bill, you're going to discuss that further at Finance? Okay. All right. Procurements. Long Island Railroad.
Dennis?
Good morning.
Good morning, Dennis.
Procurement start on page 47 in the book. There are 4 items in this month's procurement package in the total amount of $1.6 million. There's one item in the non-competitive section in the amount of $108,000, 3 items in the competitive section in the amount of $1.492 million, and there are no ratifications this month. The item in the non-competitive section is a request for MTA Board approval to award a 3-year sole source contract to MCON Systems, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $108,696 to provide maintenance services and software updates for existing MCOM emergency communication systems, which are the blue light phones that are used within the Atlantic Terminal, the Atlantic Avenue Tunnel. The next 2 items in the competitive section are requests to use the RFP procurement method pursuant to Section 1265A of the Public Authorities Law to award 2 contracts. The first contract will be for the remanufacture and delivery of 2 green locomotives with an option to purchase up to 6 additional locomotives. These locos will be owned by the Long Island Railroad and leased to New York and Atlantic to support its current freight operations. The second request will be for the preliminary design-build construction contract for the new Morris Park Locomotive Shop and Employee Facility. Long Island currently performs all maintenance activity within a 125-year-old facility. While this facility minimally served its purposes when the diesel fleet was first put into revenue service in 1998, it has become wholly inefficient as the fleet continues to age and maintenance requirements have increased. Therefore, Long Island Railroad seeks to award a design-build contract to construct a locomotive repair shop, which shall include an employee facility, storage warehouse, shop tracks, yard tracks, and back shop. The final item in the competitive section is a request by Long Island Railroad on behalf of itself, Metro North Railroad, Bridges and Tunnels, and the Metropolitan Transportation Authority Police Department for MTA Board approval to award 3 individual 5-year competitively solicited miscellaneous service contracts in the aggregate amount of $1,491,886 to 3 separate vendors, namely Total Fire Protection, Inc., Fire Command, Inc., and Campbell Fire Protection, who will each provide maintenance and repair as needed inspection, testing, and the refilling and recharging of fire extinguishers which are deployed throughout the agency properties. These items are submitted for your consideration and vote.
Any questions on any of these items? Chuck?
I have 2 sets of questions. On these diesel trains that you buy, I see that the legislature granted money for this purpose. Is that correct?
Yeah, this program started a few years ago. We actually have 2 of those green locomotives that are here now and being used by New York and Atlantic. They have 10 locomotives that were supplied to them by the Long Island Railroad when they assumed operation 20 years ago now. So the locomotives are a little long of tooth. They're certainly an older technology, so we were buying the latest state-of-the-art in terms of emissions and noise and that type of stuff. The program has been funded by the state basically at 1 locomotive per year, which is why you see this one structured this way. The first 2 were bought under the same contract, and it was actually done by New York and Atlantic. There's been a change, and the Long Island Railroad will now manage the contract going forward. They will still be used by New York and Atlantic for their business needs, but we do have money in hand for 2 additional, so that's the base order. And the anticipation is that in future years of budget permitting, we will continue to use the options to replace the remaining 6.
Correct me if I'm wrong. New York and Atlantic is a private sector enterprise. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Hauls freight out to the island?
It's a short line railroad that we operate as a concession to us. We get a fee for them having the trackage rights over our railroad, but they are the ones who are charged with meeting our obligation to provide freight service throughout the island.
If memory serves correctly, there has been a fair amount of comment by people on parts of the island which are diesel territory, that they have needs for additional diesels there. Is that a possibility in the foreseeable future?
Our diesel equipment that we use for passenger operations is still in what I'll say midpoint of its useful life in round numbers. So that will be something that will be dealt with eventually. It is not something that we're looking to do right now. It is not in the capital program.
The issue, as I recall it, was that there aren't enough diesels to make possible additional transport out in that area. Is that correct?
There's two issues. It's both the diesels and the coaches. So, for example, in the summertime when we have the peak service, Fridays we're scrambling for coaches, not just diesels. So it is, depending on the time of year, we do have limitations on our fleet. And with the ridership growing the way it has been, it's a good problem. But we are seeing, as you know, exceptional ridership out there.
If that continues, would you consider the possibility of acquiring additional equipment?
I think if it continues, it's something we'll definitely have to look at.
My second question was, on some of these design-build procurements, do they come back to us when the amount is fixed?
Yes, this is just a request to use the RFP method. Once we go through the solicitation and we're ready to award a contract, we come back to the board for their approval.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ira?
On the first one, the emergency system, the maintenance contract, going into this, didn't we know that at some point we'd need a maintenance contract for this equipment? And why didn't we do this back then?
I'd have to go back to the history of the original contract to see what we had asked for. As you know, with these contracts, when we have OEM providers who have the rights to the software, once we install their equipment, the only option to not get into a maintenance contract with them is to do a solicitation to replace all of the equipment, which then comes with its own maintenance requirements. So across the agencies, we always look at this as being the most cost-efficient method, although it's a sole source and it does create the questions from the committees and from the boards. It is the most cost-efficient method for us to procure the services that we need.
But
Dennison, isn't it true that when this was acquired, it came with a maintenance contract, and now we need that's expired, and we need those?
Yes.
Yeah, I just, is this considered, I don't, this isn't the only time I've seen this. I've seen this at transit and other, where we buy equipment, we know that it's going to need a long-term maintenance. It comes with maybe 5 years or whatever maintenance with the original contract. At the end of the term, we decide, okay, we're going to need maintenance. Was it planned at the beginning that the best thing to do, because we don't know what the price is going to be, is to wait until that time to negotiate, because we might get a better price than if we negotiated a 20-year contract at the beginning?
It's usually mutual on both parties, with both parties. Most vendors are not willing to hold their pricing for anything more than 5 years.
I see.
Most of them would like 3 years. We push them to 5 years, and that's pretty much the outside envelope that we can get. But at that point, it's we come back, and that's the method that we have to employ to get.
And as you said earlier, that getting something other than sole source of this type of equipment is not possible.
You're going to be in a sole source situation regardless.
Okay. Just want. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we all agree also, we're very grateful for the work that's going to be done at Morris Park. That is one of the more antiquated places in the railroad. And anything that can be, that's even more antiquated than Penn Station. If I found someplace that's more antiquated. So we're very grateful that the work is going to be done at Morris Park to help with that maintenance and inspection opportunities that are going to make the railroad run more efficiently in that regard.
Greg Daly's here, and he will tell you that his people were very happy to see that old place go.
I have no doubts. We've been hearing about it for a while. It's glad to finally get it done. All right, motion to approve the procurements. Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. David, MTACC.
Good morning. Capital Construction's procurement package this month consists of 4 items totaling $5.5 million. The items begin on page 64 of your committee books. There are no non-competitive items. There are 2 competitive items totaling $1.7 million. Both competitive items are requesting board approval of modifications to the East Side Access contracts, GCT Concourse and Facilities Fit-Out. The first item is requesting approval to modify the contract to demolish existing crash walls which were removed from the scope of previous contracts. The total amount of this modification is $792,438. The second item is requesting approval to modify the contract to provide for the remediation of an elevated shaft constructed under a previous contract. The total amount of this modification is $890,000. Please note that MTACC intends to deduct the cost of this corrective work from the retainage we are holding on the previous contract. These items are hereby submitted for your consideration and vote.
Any questions on any of these 2 items on page 63? Yes, Chuck. Go ahead.
You're deducting from the retainage on the prior contract. Does it mean it's being demolished because it was inadequately done, in your view, under the prior contract, or what?
That's correct.
Thanks.
Any other questions on those 2? Motion to approve, second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. David, you have 2 more?
Yes, there are 2 ratifications this month totaling $3.8 million. The first one requests ratification of a modification to the East Side Access Harold Structures Part 3 contract to furnish and install additional catenary structures and miscellaneous catenary pole hardware in the amount of $1.9 million. Part of this work is a scope and budget transfer from a future contract. The second item requests the ratification of a mod to the East Side Access Plaza Substation Queens Structures contract to implement remediation measures to prevent water infiltration at the plaza interlocking structure in the amount of $1.9 million. This is the item Michael mentioned earlier in his remarks. These items are hereby submitted for your consideration and vote.
Any questions on any of those 2 items? Motion to approve, second. All in favor? Aye, thank you. Okay. That concludes the procurements. The monthly operating report for June are in the book. Questions are now in time with that. Yes, Chuck?
Am I correct that the operating report on page 71 is a new format? Same thing over at Metro North.
I think the intent was to try to...
Yeah, no, I think that... Sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that's the same form we've been using all along. You're on.
It was revised in 2015, so it's been in use for several months. And we continue to look to streamline our data in comparison between Metro North and Long Island Railroad. So this was one of the first steps.
Well, here's my question in terms of possible confusion, and I'm easily confused. If you look at the 2015 data, it shows that 10,642 delays occurred, and in June alone, in 2015, it was 1,472, correct?
Yes.
In 2016, it looks like there are lesser delays, 7,700, and in June, there were 1,348. And what I have trouble understanding is the parenthetical references up and down the line on year to date in the right-hand column.
I'm not
Does
sure.
that simply show a subtraction?
Yeah.
Is that all it's supposed to show?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that all it's supposed
Yes.
to show? Okay.
Like I said, our first phase was to structure the information towards they looked similar in nature and our interpretation. Now what we're looking and going through is the interpretation of some of these categories and their respective assignments. One of the things that adds complexity to it is that each railroad has a different system that's collecting the data, how it's been used, how it's audited against and stuff. So we've been very sensitive and, kind of migrating and getting too aggressive to that point. So it's an ongoing effort.
Well, if you do it on that basis, take a look at the engineering unscheduled column. It looks like there are more delays in June on the engineering than there were last year, correct?
That's correct.
But you give me the data and you don't tell me why. That's the reason I'm trying to focus on it. At some point, let's, you and I offline, go through this, because
Sure.
I'm not sure it's giving me the information you want to give me.
Okay, like I said, no problem.
I know one of the issues had been, and we had talked about this for many years, on the engineering issue as to whether they were scheduled or unscheduled. We had talked about that at length.
Yeah.
And now we differentiate between the two so as to get a better understanding of why certain things happen. I know that came up at length in the Metro North issues with regard to the maintenance operation. So that helps, at least in regard to what is happening on the lines.
That's correct. I mean, there's layers of data that we can drill down further, to look at that.
Okay. And it's also clear that we had a better weather winter in 2016 than we had in 2015. And that's by itself 1,360 delays that are no longer there, just comparing 15 to 16.
Yes.
So that obviously also has an effect.
Yeah, the length of the winter in 15 versus 16, that was the one thing is, we look at it on a per event basis, but it's also the overall length.
Yep. Okay. Ira, you had a question?
Thanks, Commissioner Myrtle. Actually, when this changed, I did want to ask this question. It regards third-party operations. We formerly had a category here, Amtrak, or National Railroad Passenger Corporation. Now we have third-party operations. I assume that lumps together the Amtrak attributed delays and the freight railroad.
That's correct.
Is there anybody else who would cause us a delay that might be in there?
That pretty much the category would be Amtrak, New Jersey Transit. We do distinguish, even though Amtrak is in charge of them, say for instance, we're having equipment moves and stuff, coming out of Penn, and New York Atlantic. That would be the primary, the big three there.
Well, Amtrak's the big one, but okay, because we have to.
Yeah, but for us, it's very important that we differentiate on the lineups and through the scheduling. And so we look at each train set that is cycling in and out of Penn and assign it accordingly. Because the other component, it's good for us to kind of talk with New Jersey off to the side as well.
Okay, thanks. I might have some more questions. I'm not going to about why we did that, why we lumped all those operators together.
We can break them down.
Yeah,
I assume you can break them down.
Yeah, you have
Yes,
to,
sir.
you have to appreciate, this is a matter of what we roll up. We have hundreds of categories.
No, I understand that.
And
I'm
they
just
all
wondering
get
why
rolled up.
I don't know if I want to see the three, or what it would. It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see maybe at the end of the year, the totals, and not.
We have
every month.
hundreds and thousands lines of information.
No, I'm talking about. I'm talking about this one that I raised, the
Yes.
the Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, and New York Atlantic. It would be interesting to see that year to year, because I would guess New York Atlantic over time wasn't very many, but maybe in the past year it was significant. And Amtrak, of course, is the historically is our
Amtrak's
biggest.
going to be
Right, the
biggest because
it's Penn Station.
not only do we have their operations to contend with, but they maintain the plant that we use. So plant failures would be attributed to them.
Right.
New Jersey Transit doesn't really have any plant, and New York and Atlantic doesn't have any plant
we see
that
in the-
affect us.
I see that in the events relative to 10 late delays.
Yeah.
That's why. So, but it'd be interesting to see what portion is or isn't just once a year. It would be sufficient.
Sure.
Thanks.
It's definitely in our interest to have this granular information as we have our ongoing discussions with everybody involved. it helps focus the conversation on what's taking place out there. Facts are always good to work with.
Anyone
But
else?
it helps us to know,
Right.
so we have in our minds who we should be working with, or who the board should maybe focus on in issues of delays.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anyone else? And I'm very glad to see the success of Mumford and Sons caused us 16 delays that night. That's, I guess you take it when you get it in that regard. Any other comments or questions? If not, motion to adjourn? Second. Thank you all very much. See you in September.